but nevertheless, people do try. Brothers do try, especially the brothers who had families, not the ones who were single. It's usually ones who were married, who had kids, who had, you know, who had more of a responsibility, unlike myself at that point. So that's what eventually you think about. And I'm not going to say here, myself, and I'm sure Shaf, we've considered to kill ourselves because it's the position that put you in, and the stress you go through, not having your family there, you know, not being able to talk to your mom, your father, your brother, your sisters, not having, you know, being allowed to have a letter that Shaf said. My mother sent me a letter, who my sister wrote, and the first line was, "How are you, son?" At the end, it was all, the middle was all crossed out, and the bottom, "I love you, mum." I mean, how much hope do you get from that letter? And you know, there's no hope, and you know, you think of killing yourself. That's what happens. Alhamdulillah, you know, most brothers would help you, you know, talk to you and say, you know, it's not the right thing to do. Have patience, and alhamdulillah, patience got us through.
Thank you. I mean, I think I just wanted to say that I think it's important to know that if you do crack under this pressure and make false confessions, that doesn't really necessarily help you at all. Of the majority of people, almost everybody who's been released from Guantanamo, apart from a few who have won court cases, it's essentially been because of diplomatic arrangements. Cooperating or not cooperating inside the mad world of Guantanamo doesn't guarantee, it may get you better treatment in there, it won't guarantee that you will actually be released, or that you will be charged, or that anything will happen, in fact. And, you know, I wondered if one of you could just mention what was the trigger after you finally cracked and made your false confession, as to what was the evidence that didn't come from the Americans that actually got you back home to the UK?
I think it was in September 2003 that the British came to see us and said that when this video was filmed, because there was a date on the video which was the 1st of the 8th 2000 I think, and they didn't know whether it was the 8th of January or the 1st of August,
right.
Which it didn't make any difference because I was at university both times, I was working, so I had an alibi for both dates. But they weren't prepared to believe that, so the British had to come and confirm that during these times that they were in the UK. But they also said, as a last statement from the British was, according to our records, they were in the UK, but you have to take into consideration that they might have travelled on false passports. Which I thought was ridiculous. How could I falsify university records when I was in Afghanistan?
Yeah, right.
So I don't know how that worked.
I recall one of you was working in Curry's, yes,
yeah,
but maybe they thought that you took a very long lunch break. But that was the kind of final piece of evidence, was you know, a work slip from Curry's proving that, you know, the time this video was taken. But anyway, we've just got a few more topics to go. Are we okay for time?
5 minutes.
Okay. Just briefly then, we've heard about how Dr. Aafia Siddiqui has been physically brutalized in many, many ways. And I just wondered if you could briefly talk about two things really from Guantanamo. One, that you were injected with stuff, you don't know what was going on with that. And the other one, that cooperation with interrogators meant that you would get medical treatment. That from what I've heard generally, if you didn't cooperate like they wanted you to cooperate, in other words, to confess that yes, you knew Bin Laden, whatever, then you would be denied medical treatment. And I know that from reading your stories from Guantanamo that you know of some examples of that happening. And this may be, the same thing may have happened to Dr. Aafia, that I'm sure the same regime was there, medical treatment dependent on compliance.
While we were in Guantanamo, a child was brought in. He was 14 years old at the time. He's from Canada. His name's Umar Qadr. He had been shot point blank range 3 times in his chest by an American soldier, and his condition was horrific. I couldn't believe how he was still alive. He had shrapnel in his left eye, which you couldn't see. He just had one eye to see out of. And during the 2.5 years we were there, he got really bad medical treatment. He was told, confess cooperate and we'll give you medical treatment. He was put into isolation, where the isolation cells during the day it'll be 110 degrees Fahrenheit. During the night it can go down to -10 because they have AC in those cells, and what they're supposed to do is put it on during the day and turn it off during the night. They used to do the opposite and put it on during the night when it was cold outside anyway. And because of that cold, he was suffering. He was in the isolation cell next to our cell, and you could hear him crying at night, and they wouldn't do nothing for him. He's still there at this moment, and he was treated horrifically. He was on one time. He was on the frequent flyer list as well. He was moved numerous occasions, and just to see him, he's a child. He's about 22 now, but he's still got that child mentality. He was in the cells next to us, and we used to talk to him, and he still used to have that childlike aspect to him, and it was difficult to see what he was going through and not being able to do anything for him. And it was seeing him every day and just like trying to reassure him that he will get released one day. It was impossible. If I was in his position, I don't know what I would have done, but that brother, mashallah, he's very strong.
We heard earlier, we were discussing, we were hearing about Dr. Aafia Siddiqui's children and how her son Ahmed was mysteriously reappeared. I believe that was last year, and her daughter Mariam mysteriously reappeared this year. And there is still obviously much to be discovered and told about where exactly her children were held for all these years, whether there was a prison for children, whether exactly what the circumstances were of their detention. And Shafiq has actually, by talking about the story of Omar Khadr, who was 15 when he was captured actually, and is still held and is supposedly going to face a trial which is going to restart quite soon. But it touches on the question of juveniles and how they were treated. So I thank you for talking about how badly Omar Khadr was treated, because he was a juvenile when he was captured. According to treaties that, again, all civilized countries have signed, you aren't supposed to be responsible for your actions under the age of 18. And juvenile prisoners are supposed to be rehabilitated, not subjected to this kind of awful punishment. So, bearing in mind that we don't know what happened to Dr. Aafia's, two of Dr. Aafia's children, and especially we don't know what happened to Salaam and the baby, but that her son and her daughter were held for all these years. I wondered if you could just conclude this by just talking about maybe some of the other juveniles who were held with you in Guantanamo and their circumstances.
There were, I think in total there was another 3 juveniles in Guantanamo from the age of 7 to 11. 7, 9, and 11 I think. And they was all Afghanis. And Yusuf from Chad. From what we know, the 9-year-old, who was the youngest in Guantanamo, he went through the exactly same procedure as we went, as adults did. So there's the Americans don't see the difference in terms of if he's a child, if he's a baby, or if he's an adult. They treat you the same way. You're a terrorist, you're a Muslim by name, you got to be a terrorist, no matter how old you were. Also, there was a man who he must have been over 80 odd. He couldn't literally walk, and the way they treated him, he couldn't get out of. We had to sleep on bunks, and he couldn't get on the bunk to sleep. So he was helped to get on the bunk to sleep, and he couldn't get off the bunk because that's how old he was, and he would urinate and defecate on the bed, and they had to come out every day and clean him. They don't care how old you were or how young you were. He was a Muslim by name. That was more of a good of a reason to arrest you and treat you the way they treated everybody. There's no difference how a person was treated. So even the 9-year-olds were subject to everything that we went through: cavity searches, stripped in front of everybody, playing with your private parts. It was part of the procedure. So it didn't matter, if he was a 2-year-old. I believe they would do it. And whatever happened with the youngest child of Aafia Siddiqui, I mean, I have a child who's 2 now. You know, only Allah knows what sisters are going through. I think it's about time, you know, we all do something about it, rather than just getting together, sitting here, taking in what we say, go home, think about it for a couple of hours, sleep on it. The next day, everybody goes back to work, or back to their own life. That's what I gotta say.
I don't think that I could really say anything else after what Ruhal has just said to bring home to you how real this is. So I'd really like to thank everybody for coming here today. I'd very much like to thank Shafiq and Ruhal for coming here and for taking the time to dredge up some of their terrible memories about what happened to them and to talk to us.